Listen to the distinct sound of this pollution solution. It's a car that runs on compressed air, called a CAT for compressed air technology. It's the result of 14 years of research and development by French engine designer Guy Negre. With the CAT, Negre has created a car that produces zero emissions.
The premise of this project was that in order to run a car, particularly in town, you need very little energy. And with compressed air, you can accumulate enough energy to do that.
Compressed air has long been used as a power source for various tools and equipment. For car designers, compressed air has been difficult to harness. But now, Negre and his team at Motor Development International have built an engine that they believe will blow the car market away. Within an internal combustion engine, gasoline and oxygen ignite. The resulting explosions create pressure, which pushes the pistons that turn the crankshaft. With MDI's engine, precisely timed bursts of compressed air create the pressure needed to drive the pistons, pollutant-free. Supplying enough energy to power the car requires pressure at 4,300 pounds per square inch. That's more than 100 times the pressure in a standard car tire. Forced inside a tank small enough to fit under the CAT's chassis, it's the formula for a potential ticking time bomb. So the pressure was on the designers to build a tank that won't explode.
This is to give you an idea of the technology inside of the car. You can see that under the floor you have some carbon fiber tanks. It has to be carbon fiber on cars because it is very safe. If there is a crash or something, there's no problem with pieces going everywhere. There is just a crack and then the air goes out.
The tanks can even withstand the force of small caliber gunfire. Since it's being powered by air, the CAT has a lightweight aluminum frame to keep it lean and nimble. The same care went into the body.
The body of the car will be made with fiberglass. Using fiberglass is very important for us because the car will be lighter, and having a light car, you will have more range.
We are going to expand the industrial concept we came up with, which is to make cars in small factories located within the market. It is an original concept. It's very important for the economy, for social issues, pollution issues, and the environment.
The compressed air car works. Now all Guy Negre needs is the support of the public and the automobile industry.
Breakthroughs are always difficult, especially technological breakthroughs, because the industry generally follows the direction that has already been established, and they don't like to see someone trying to change the course. But today, there is a worldwide need to change the course.
Hey folks, and welcome to another video from A Plain Truth. Info and questioning everything to find truth. Again, Joe S. is doing an amazing job explaining F1s, how they do not run on fuel. Here's the fuel tanks in the purple showing how in the F1s they increased the size of the fuel tanks in 2010. But when we get into it, they're saying that there's 45 gallons of fuel or 205 liters in these little tiny cars that go 200 miles an hour. Look where the fuel is, right behind the driver, right under the air intake valve, according to the F1 diagrams and schematics. And if you take a look at a Formula One driver sitting in a car, he's no more than just 2 to 3 feet above the ground at most, and behind him is the air exhaust. And look at the air intakes on each side. Air intakes everywhere, on the top and on each sides, because they run on compressed air. But look at, they're supposed to be the equivalent of a 45-gallon barrel drum sitting behind the driver, along with the engine and the transmission and everything. Give me a break.
Fuel you and I get at pumps. But petrol is petrol and it's highly flammable. That's the point of the stuff. In races, F1 cars must now carry all their fuel from the start. 200 litres of petrol.
200 litres. I'm sure he just said 200 litres. Let's just double check that.
200 litres of petrol travelling at 200 miles an hour. That is quite a missile.
That is utter lies, and I'll show you what I mean.
Then, behind Kubica, we've got the fuel cell. Lots of different compartments.
Bollocks. I'm telling you now, that is bollocks. Right? And conveniently, the engine's not in it because, I shall tell you in a second.
And that's to make sure the fuel doesn't kind of swish around when the car's going along. So just in front of the fuel cell is this part that's his seat as well. So I'm going to leave that there. Perfect. Now, it wouldn't be F1 without a little bit of secrecy. And there is a reason why there is a board over this part, the engine.
The reason is so we can put this mock-up bollocks tank in front and make you think that's where fuel goes into this thing. What a load of bollocks. It just gets worse anyway.
It's a V8. It was made by BMW, and they could technically still sell one of these, so no peeking. But I can show you an...
So I looked over fuel tanks for F1 systems and came across this race car engineer site, and one of the things I immediately noticed is they don't show a full car. All they show is the bladder, fuel system with a cell tank located behind the driver but in front of the engine, large leak-proof flexible bladder made of military-grade ballistics to contain all the fuel during a race, 230 liters of fuel. And then here is the fuel bladder, apparently, with the pumps that pump it out. But again, you don't see the full car or anything, just this little bladder section behind the seat that supposedly is holding all of the fuel, some more than 20 gallons to 40 to 50 gallons, depending on who's saying it. But there is no pictures of the full system in place here.
These are Formula One cars here, and I just want you to show you the flow rate of how much, this is litres per second, that they're claiming they put into these cars. So there you are, 11.97, so nearly 12 litres a second is going into the fuel tank that's on board this.
When the fuel's finished, you will have figures that will tell you the motor speed and a fuel flow of 12 litres per second.
All right, so I wanted to find out how many miles long is an F1 car race, the smallest number of complete laps that exceeds 305 kilometers. 305 kilometers works out to 189 miles. We know the Indy 500 is 500 miles. So 189 miles, well, how much fuel is consumed? Well, the average race fuel consumption of an F1 car is 75 liters or 4 miles per gallon. The average length of the lap is 5 kilometers. And again, the average total race distance is 300 kilometers. So here we take 189 miles in a race, 189 miles, and divide it by 4 miles to the gallon, and we get 47 gallons of fuel that must be in these F1 cars. And so this again is where they say the 45 gallons of fuel is stored right behind the driver, right below the air intake valve. All right, so 45-gallon drum here. Remember, it's 47 gallons they're saying are fit in these tanks, not made of steel, but some Kevlar material that protects us, crashing it at hundreds of miles an hour, and it's right behind the driver's seat. Supposedly, a 45-gallon barrel drum is sitting right behind there on some Kevlar bladder that we're supposed to think is where they put the fuel, when in actuality, these things are running on compressed air, just like jet engines. So a U.S. liquid gallon weighs 8.345 pounds. If we multiply 8 times 45 pounds, we're going to get something that weighs over, let's do the math here, 8.34 times 45 pounds. Let's see if my math is right, off the 360 pounds here at of weight just in fuel alone in these cars, in these Kevlar military grade supposedly fuel batters that weigh 45, it's equal to a 45-gallon drum. Now look at the size of this guy. So let's say he's 6 foot, and behind the cowling of the air intake is supposedly a 45-gallon drum. Are you kidding me? Look at the air intake vents, folks. Oh, it's got the transmission and the engine behind it too. Where do they put the fuel? Where do they put the fuel? It's all a bunch of bollocks, as Jones S. is telling us. All a bunch of bollocks. So we can get a comparison in size from a top fuel dragster diagram, and look at number 2 here. That's the fuel tank, and notice the size of a person sitting in a 6 foot tall person compared to these fuel tanks. And I also wanted to show you a typical top fuel dragster uses 12 U.S. gallons and 22 3/4 gallons of fuel during warm-up, burn-up, staging, quarter mile. So these tanks are, let's say, 25 gallons, which would be half as big as an F1. And look at the tanks, folks. They're made of steel. Remember the other one, rubber bladders? Are you kidding me? In the Formula One race cars, they're using rubber bladders, but in dragsters, they're using steel and heavy metal containing fuel tanks because they're flammable. Give me a break. There's no fuel in the F1 cars.
Here is described. This time we're going to look at the air horn. The air horn is a device which takes the air from the roll hoop and supplies it to the engine. It's quite a critical design in that it has to integrate into the roll hoop, also not get affected by the driver's head, and distribute the air evenly in between the cylinders in the engine. Also not get affected by the driver's head, and distribute the air evenly in between the cylinders in the engine.
And this thing, it's Mickey Mouse is not a word for it. It's ridiculous. But I'll go back to this one here. Go this way. This is the other side. Sorry, you've the other side here. It looks like an intercooler radiator thing here. Again, another good shot there, showing you that it's the just a cover for where the air comes into the engine. And there's a bit of gold plating here, which you get on the McLaren F1. Is it the F1 P1 or whatever it is? And let's have a look. More shots here. As I say, it's all engine, and then at the back you've got the transmission and bits and bobs, but to drive the wheels at the back, and there's a radiator at the side there. But there it is. There's the air intake. It's massive. It needs to be, because it's sucking and burning this air. I'm going to show you a little bit of video, but as per usual, let's look at the statistics on this thing. We'll go down here. You can find the webpage, read it at your own leisure. But there we are. What's 109 miles per hour? Quite a feat of engineering. 2 Pratt & Whitney gas turbine engines, jet engines, but there's the one there, as you can see. 878 gallons. And he says, hold on, sorry, I'm doing my usual skill set here. If I go to that one there, that's 4,000 litres. And we all know what 4,000 litres, it's 4 of those giant pallets of tiles, or... Get it to play.
I remember the night that these arrived. We picked them up in Kansas and flew them into Stead here. It was dark when they arrived, and that was the beginning of our heavy lift helicopter mission.
Well, anyway, if you think the fuel tanks are under where the engines are, I give up. I really do just give up. It's all engine, it's all structure in this thing, the rest of it. The front of the cabin is the cabin where the people are. The electrics, the hydraulics, everything else is inside this thing, but there is no fuel tanks. But he was just showing me these 1,000-litre containers that are basically a metric ton, and it says here it took 2 to 3 blokes to push them onto the trucks when they were empty, I think it's saying here, and it needed an electric forklift to get them on if there's one of you. But it's saying here it would need 1,000 to 1,500 of these, yeah, to go in to fuel a Concorde aircraft. But what he also do this is 100,000-litre tank on the back of a giant lorry, and it's ginormous. Can you see that? Can you see the front of the lorry there? Anyway, there's Concorde. Look at the tiny little wings, and if you go on Google, this is fuel consumption here. Basically it's showing you fuel capacity there. Oops, 119,500 litres, which is just beyond, it's beyond bonkers, it really is. And it says there the maximum takeoff weight there of 185 tons. This is just insane, it really is. But going, a fantastic looking machine, isn't it? But there wasn't a drop of liquid went into those jet engines. The central body is all taken up with the cabin, and then obviously the underneath has got to put the landing gear and the wheels, and then they say that the rest of it's engine.
Talk recently about aeroplanes and their fuel. Mostly it's the A380. Didn't really take too much notice of it till I started hearing about the weights. Let me just shut that window. When I started to hear the weights involved, particularly the fuel, that's what got my attention. In those wings alone, you're supposed to have 210 tons of fuel, right? Then you've got the actual engines as well. I think they're 4 ton, the engines. So you're looking at another 4, 8, 16 ton for the engines. Let's just stick with the fuel for now anyway. Let's not complicate things. 210 tons of fuel. Now I'm in a tower crane. Pretty big one. This crane can lift 8 ton. Average crane on sites in Britain is about 6 ton. You get obviously a lot heavier lifters and a few smaller ones like ped cranes. This machine can pick 8 ton up. So just to give you some idea, you need 26 of these tower cranes to pick up the amount of fuel that just goes.
26 tower cranes, and he says these can lift 8 tons. Now that's a hell of a lot of weight. Anyway, let me just...
It wouldn't be F1 without a little bit of secrecy, and there is a reason why there is a board over this part, the engine.
This one's on more, this is evidence on why the gas turbine power plant uses air as its fuel and no liquid fuel goes inside the modern jet engine, okay? This, you can Google this by these people here to get a copy of this book and download it. They do a free trial on one of the websites. Get this book. Okay, here you go. This is the evidence. It's the oil. Inside this unit, you have oil like inside of a car. The oil here lubricates these bearings, the fidget spinners bearings, okay? Now, the oil needs to be checked and topped up very infrequently. It's, you know, every so many thousand hours or whatever it is. But basically, it's a sealed unit, and obviously this oil keeps the bearings from drying out, and it powers other mechanisms that do hydraulics and bits and bobs, okay? But the main crux of the evidence I'm going to show you is inside of a car you need to cool the oil down. Well, you have a radiator, don't you? It's put at the front where you capture the air, okay? So it transmits the heat away from the block via water with antifreeze in it. But anyway, on a jet engine, there's no water in here, there's just oil, and that oil needs to be cooled down, okay? This is what I've gathered by reading the book and watching Agent JZ. Anyway, okay. What we're on here, this is lubrication systems. Now this here, this thing here is the oil cooler, okay? It says here, when the oil heats up, the thermo valve expands and closes, forcing the oil to flow through the cooler. Excuse me. If a restriction occurs, and clog the cooler. But anyway, this is the cooler, okay? So you're going to have the oil going through these tiny little bits here. But look where it's located. It's located on the fuel inlet and the fuel outlet, because it's air. Air's going through this fuel inlet, and it cools down the oil because it's fresh, cool air coming in from the atmosphere. And when the